now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Kathy Peretta, Vice President with Ipsos Canada's Market Strategy and Understanding Research Practice. Kathy, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Ellen, and welcome everyone to our highlight sharing of our annual Canada Chats Trend Study. For those of you not familiar with CHATS, it's an acronym for Consumption Habits and Attitudinal Trends, and it is a study which we deliver to the Canadian market annually. This week happens to mark the launch of our 10th edition. Just let me remind you that today we're solely providing a highlights overview emanating from the main resource report that is 100+ slides and is accompanied by a customized presentation. In this age of multiple crises, there is continued uncertainty and change. However, even in this environment, it remains crucial to have the foresight to be able to predict what's new, anticipate what's coming, and recognize both the disruptive and the productive change. Therefore, the significance and the importance of trends remains undeniable and a key foundational component of building a solid change-ready culture. So in this environment, it's really critical to continue to think about how the pandemic experience continues to influence our post-pandemic reality. Think about how needs have shifted from the communal experience and the collective well-being, we're all in this together, to now focusing on personal priorities with an emphasis on really focusing on or tailoring experiences to cater to the specific needs of the individual. It's also critical to more holistically understand the impacts of inflation beyond the shelf alone. Consider how rising interest rates, rising prices, and increasing pressure on the wallet is shaping what I eat, how I prepare, where I source it, where I eat it, who I eat it with. We also need to consider the deeper human motivations emerging from the news of the day that fills our daily media feeds. So think about things like climate change impact, the necessity to reduce waste that contributes to overall environmental stress. And also consider how things like geopolitical events breeds uncertainty and instability. Canadians, as both citizens and consumers, realize that they are both a cause and a casualty of these changes. So, to keep the consumer close in these very unique times, and to navigate a dynamic path ahead with that cause and casualty mindset, we've developed a framework, or a compass, if you will, to help our clients evaluate the macro forces and the trends within them to really uncover valuable insights. Now, trends have lots of applications when building consumer-led strategies, but it's really important to reflect awareness and empathy and authenticity when communicating to the consumer. It's also useful for trends to assist in diagnosing performance results, fostering innovation so you can better meet future expectations. And then also really important to arm sales teams and Catman teams with information consistent with real life experiences, attitudes, and beliefs. And so when we look within the framework, we have 4 macro forces and a number of trends within them that we assess, size, and evaluate impacts. Consider the societal force and things like population shifts, again, those inflation and pricing pressures, and a variety of ESG factors. Consider the consumer force and how our needs and motivations are changing when it comes to things like health and convenience, personalization, the demand for experience. Consider the contextual cues and their importance, understanding day parts and the rebound of food service, where I eat, again, who I'm with, what is the occasion type, does seasonality play a role? And then finally, considering the technology force and things like information and access at your fingertips, health tracking, idea inspiration, multi-sensory experiences as we see the rise in AR and AI experiences. With that in mind today, we have a number of objectives. We'd like to introduce you or reintroduce you to our food and beverage services. We want to introduce you to the generations because in the context of the resource report, we evaluate the trend impacts on the generations, look at a select number of trends, look at how those trends have implications for different day parts, and then take a little look ahead for you. Now, at Ipsos, our ability to produce robust and actionable trends reports is born out of the strength of our syndicated tracking practices. Those are daily tracking studies in field every day, 365 days a year, many since 2012, that track Canadian sentiment, attitudes, and behaviors. The principal source for our tracking is our 5 study. And 5 is an online diary that tracks what an individual ate and drank yesterday behaviorally across all categories, brands, day parts, and venues, and then provides a considerable amount of coloring in information that really highlights why the behaviors are what they are. We also will layer a little of our food service monitor in there as well. That's all things out of home, understanding things like market size, dollars, traffic, change in occasion, product performance, and the why behind the food service buy. And a little bit of our alcohol consumption tracking study, which tracks all things with regard to alcohol consumption, both in Canada and in the US. We also have at Ipsos other syndicated studies, namely our Ipsos Essentials report, really critical to understanding current sentiment. Now, different from other trends reports in the marketplace, this Canadian tracking allows us to identify, size, trend, and most importantly, evaluate the impact of trends on a variety of cohorts, different channels, and most importantly, on the shifting usage of our clients' categories and brands. So let's take a look at the generations, which is the lens through which in our resource report this year, we evaluate trends. We are assessing 7 generations, ranging from kids 2+ years through to people like myself, more mature boomers. Different generations really have different life experiences, and that's really formulated based on historical experience, different cultural elements, as well as technological context, particularly in their formative years. So it's a really important lens that can really aid in much more concise targeting and positioning. So with that in mind, let's start off by looking at societal forces. One of the major societal forces that we see impacting overall food and beverage consumption is sheer population shifts. Consider the impacts and how multifaceted they are with a few population shifts in mind. So think about the fact that Canada today, 40+ million people. We were only 36 million back in 2016. We will be 44 million Canadians by 2030. And that growth in population just expands demand. With that expansion, there are more households, but households are shrinking. And so it's really important to evaluate the impacts or the behaviors and attitudes in smaller households versus overall households to really uncover opportunity for growth. We also see for the first time in 50 years that the average age of a Canadian is aging down to 41 years of age. And what that really signals is the changing of the influence and spending baton between boomers to millennials. By 2029, millennials will take over as the largest adult cohort. And consider one element alone. That is, if we look back in all our tracking, millennials drive the most traffic and have the highest spend at food service. And that's a big shift with implications for those both in the retail market and in the food service market. And then finally, most of this population change we see today is propelled by the growth in multicultural Canadians, who by their ascending size and spending power should never be looked at as a total cohort, but rather by individual groups based on country of origin and length of time in Canada. But they've introduced a rich tapestry of culinary traditions, ranging from unique flavors and ingredients. They've altered meat fundamentals. They've expanded the overall Canadian palate. They've really transformed our restaurant industry, and they have forever changed the holiday and celebratory landscape in Canada, just to name a few items. Now, inflation is also the topic du jour, and there are both attitudes and behaviors that are important to understand. 77% of Canadians now report being impacted by inflation and rising prices. 84% of individuals report that they think companies are using inflation as a way to increase profits, and 61% of consumers still report a bit of shock when they go into the store and they see rising prices. Now, those are attitudes, but how are behaviors changing? And within the 5 study, we asked 20 statements to understand how consumers are intending to change their behaviors based on the shifting sentiment. The top 3 are comparing prices more often, cooking at home more often, and eating out less. Now, responsiveness to these attitudinal shifts also change by generation. So there's unique tendencies or distinguishing propensity within each of the generations. So consider that Gen Z are more likely to say, don't shop when you're hungry. Millennials, well, they're likely to change grocery stores. They're also focused on wasting less. Gen X are stronger developed for entertaining less often. And remember, we spend more money when we entertain, so that has implications. Whereas boomers report that they are buying fewer prepared foods. Now, when it comes to preparing more foods, Canadian meal preparers are looking to spice it up, and I mean that literally. There's an 8% increase in meal preparers reporting that versus last year, they are preparing more multicultural dishes. And when we look at multicultural dish cuisines, Italian, Indian, and Mexican top the list. But of course, there are unique flavor preferences by generation, as you can see. But that's not exactly the whole story, because really putting forward to the Canadian population a solid recipe or dish strategy requires not only multicultural dishes, but also balancing it off with North American favorites. And there's a reason behind that. The increase in multicultural cuisine preparation is driven by North American meal preparers. But the growth in North American dish preparation is driven by multicultural meal preparers. So there's a real opportunity here to either speak to the cuisine or speak to the cohort quite differently. We also know that there is a rising consciousness, and certainly ESG is also a hot topic. And remember that casualty mindset. It's growing in importance. In fact, we bucket over 20 statements, which we track in each of our syndicated tracking studies based on strongly influencing consumption decisions in 3 buckets. Product provenance, which is all things around the product, which has actually slipped a bit since last year. The environmental factors led by climate change and waste reduction, which is up considerably, and social concerns. Now, it's really critical to evaluate not just the buckets, but also the individual lever importance with an attached willingness to pay more for these attributes. Both millennials and consumers living in households with kids showed the strongest development for a willingness to pay more for these benefits. But it's really important to be able to shape more personalized communications. It's something that's been missing from many of the current programs, using things like storytelling and two-way conversations, highlighting organizational challenges, to actually putting forward an environmentally friendly platform. So not just highlighting the challenge, but also the accomplishments to really create a more authentic and more personalized communication plan. So the next force we want to talk about is the all-important consumer. And of course, fundamentally important to understanding the consumer is understanding how needs, both functional and emotional, are shifting and changing. So the top need states driving consumption decisions today are comforting cravings, taste, it's got to be easy, need to fill that hunger, hydration, mental uplift. But what's really important to be able to look out to the future is to understand what's growing and what that growth rate is. And so we see that the fastest rising need states are a combination of both experience, returning to social connection, an adherence to a social exploration, finding the new, the next, latest, and greatest, and a combination of energy needs, both emotional and physical, and value to top the list. So when we think about value and its implications on consumption decisions overall, we look at a metric called the value trigger. It's good value for money and it's saving money. So it's not what's impacting at shelf, but it's what's impacting the decision to consume. And the value trigger plays in 35% of all consumption decisions in an average day. That's up 3.5% versus last year. The strongest development at 140 index is at meals, led by dinner. But I think what we found that's really interesting this year is the rising implications of the value trigger for snacking, which is up 7%. Now, understanding how consumers define good value for money is also important. And so we look at associated themes around what does value mean when deciding what to eat and drink. Dietary fit, authenticity, portability, and premium rise to the top. And the strongest developed categories for good value for money are around things like sliced bread, ground beef, French fries, and fresh vegetables. Bread's an interesting story because if we look back to 2015, bread was not in the good value for money, but rather it was in the bucket of saving money. And so the other side of the equation is understanding how consumers associate saving money. What are the themes around that? Multiple uses, kid appeal, has to be fast and easy, and ritual and habit. And you can see the categories that are overdeveloped for saving money. It's also important when we think about good value for money to think about health. And overall today, Canadians are thinking about health. 37% of all decisions in an average day are motivated by the need for something healthy and nutritious. But if we dig a little deeper into personal health priorities, we can see that three themes, continue to shift demand. And we actually presented these in the 2018 CHATS report, and 5 years later, they are still incredibly important. Nutrient and nourishment, that impacts 42% of all decisions motivated by the need for something healthy and nutritious. Physical benefits, over a quarter of decisions, and emotional well-being, over a third of all decisions. With that in mind, and looking a little deeper into benefits, whether it be physical or emotional, we can see there's a rise in consumers looking for those kinds of metabolic benefits. In fact, over a quarter of food and beverage choices are motivated by the need for a metabolic benefit. That's up 24% versus 2020, and the charge is being led by younger consumers. If we look overall at what kind of benefits individual consumers are seeking, it's still led by weight control, but it also extends to digestive health and immunity and energy. With more intentional decision making around benefits and metabolic benefits that aid with specific diet with different lifestyles or dietary regimes, it's not surprising that that regime interest continues to grow. Overall, we see that 1 in 4 Canadian adults, 1 in 4, follows a unique dietary regime. It's really interesting to see that it's led by veganism, vegetarianism, intermittent fasting, calorie reduction, things like Mediterranean, keto, and dairy-free. Think about intermittent fasting. It's up 4% versus last year. When we look a little deeper into it and try and understand why consumers are more often adhering to this eating approach, weight loss tops the list. Mindfulness about what and how much I eat, reduction of bloating, also the intent to control insulin sensitivity or regulate blood sugar levels. So when we talk about sugar overall, it leads us into some long-term trends in terms of nutrient priorities that we've been capturing through our 5 study. So if we look at the nutrition facts table and we ask consumers to report of the elements on this table, what is most important to you, calories continue to be the most important element, though rates are declining simply because there are new priorities that consumers have. Think about sugar. Versus 2015, the importance of sugar is up 38%. If we think about protein, not even on the radar screen in 2015, it's up a whopping 105%. Carbohydrate import as the most important element also increased, and really interesting to see almost a 10% increase in that ingredient panel, that list of ingredients on the product. Interestingly, it's millennial families that are driving the interest in label scrutiny or what's in the product, looking for real food ingredients and cleaner and simpler ingredients. With the trend of simplification in mind, I've actually seen something, we saw it actually at the end of 2021, we called it out last year, but it might be one of the most impactful shifts that I've seen in a long time. And it's the contraction in what individual consumers eat. At first, we thought it was driven by the value trigger or consumers concerned about inflation. But when we look deeper, we see that there is a number of factors influencing this overall contraction in per capita consumption. In fact, if we compare serving rates per capita in 2023 back to 2020, there was a 9% decrease, and the declines are most notable among those younger cohorts. So it is a trend that we are going to keep our eye on into the future. Now, obviously, there is a pervasive influence of technology in most aspects of our life, but really it is revolutionizing individuals' food consumption decisions. If we think about the priorities of consumers today, we're not necessarily just going to the fridge or the cupboard and pondering, okay, what am I going to eat? There are many other ways that we can access food pretty conveniently right at our fingertips. And in fact, 30% of individuals report use of technology in shaping consumption decisions on a daily basis. And overall, this offers manufacturers and retailers and operators many new touch points, not just to impact buying decisions, but really to reach the consumer at that moment of consumption. And if we look at the top uses of technology, not surprisingly, product information and reviews, similarly, restaurant information and reviews, but also recipe strategies, going to online communities and forums, nutrition tracking, and there are those order delivery apps. But beware, in tandem with rising use of technology, 1 in 5 consumers, 19% actually, report a distrust of the product health information that's available to them. And they cite things like credibility of sources, exaggerated marketing claims, erosion of institutional trust, sensationalization, or celebritization. So the point is, you need to be authentic when communicating with consumers who have higher literacy rates than we've seen in the past. The final force that we're looking at are the contextual cues. So those cues that really shape our occasion decisions. One of the critical changes that we've seen in terms of contextual cues is the rebound in food service. Now, despite many attitudes reported to the contrary, we see that eating outside the home, both in a dollar spend and in traffic, is up versus last year, and it's up across all segments. It's up also importantly at both the breakfast and lunch occasion, and they've been pretty battered over the last 3 years, but they are on the rebound. Now, in tandem with operators challenging retail for their share of wallet, they're also challenging for new venues. And what I mean by that is the fight for the home environment is on. While dining at restaurants or on-premise dining is up versus last year, a whopping 72% of traffic is off-premise traffic. So we really have to consider the implications from both the slow and steady rise of food service and also the fight for off-premise occasions. Now, when we think about where we eat, the bounce back in terms of away from home consumption is underway. While the majority of occasions remain consumed at home, 7 in 10, it is down versus last year, with an increase in away from home consumption. And we've reported over the last couple of years that has benefited things like the lunchbox and the lunch bag. But there's another benefit that we can see, and that continues to be eating at someone else's home. So as we enter into the holiday season and we look at celebratory occasions, there's a new trend burgeoning, and it's the potlucking fit. And what that means is bringing things to other people's homes to eat together to reduce the preparation and the cost burden. So think about the opportunity to carry sides and snacks and specialty cocktails, bringing dessert. I mean, this is something that's on the rise, and I think represents a very significant opportunity for manufacturers. So while modern life often involves hectic schedules and we're so busy all the time, it's resulting in the majority of consumption occasions in an average day being solo occasions. 60% of all consumptions in an average day are consumed alone. And while some people enjoy the solitude or the silence, others still value and prioritize those communal meals for socializing and connection. But we have to keep in mind that there is a lot of distraction while eating, either active or passive distraction. And there's lots of different activities that we're involved in. If we look at meals, 52% of all meals are not where we're engaging or socializing, but we're distracted. If we look at snacks, it's a whopping 67% of occasions. And remember that this kind of distracted eating has consequences for how much we eat, what we eat, our willingness to prepare when we're alone and distracted versus social and engaged. And it also connects to the healthfulness of our intake patterns. So certainly something to keep your eye on. When we think about consumption and trends and the impacts, it's always critical to understand the occasion dynamics and the day part performance. And within the 5 study, we look at day parts in 2 ways. We look at it by the number of events or occasions in an average day, and we see that 42% of events or occasions in an average day are at meals, while 58% are at snacks. And then we look at the servings, or the number of items consumed at particular occasions. Meals are more complex, so 59% of foods and commercial beverages are consumed at meals, 41% at snacks. And while understanding the consumption rates, it's always important to dig further into the day parts to really concisely understand the targeting and positioning and product fit within those unique occasions. So we're going to talk about some of the changes that we've seen at the breakfast occasion. And breakfast has been tremendously impacted by some of the shifting consumer preferences over the past year. Consider the overall contraction in the breakfast universe. So fewer servings of foods and commercial beverages being consumed at breakfast. This has resulted in both a deprioritization that breakfast in a top 2 box score is an important meal in the day, and it's also added to increased skipping. It's really important to see how that changes over time. As a result, we see fewer cold breakfasts, but we actually do see a rise in hot morning fare. We're a cold weather country, so it shouldn't be surprising that 56% of breakfast foods consumed, are hot items, and that share is up versus last year. When we look at the needs shaping breakfast occasion, they continue to be driven principally the top needs by the 5 H's. So that's hunger, health, habit, hurry, habit, hurry, and hearty. And but when we look at the fastest rising needs, we see growth in that seeking of benefits, both physical energy and mental focus benefits. The retail side of the business is not only impacted by the contraction alone, but it's also impacted by the return to food service. So food service traffic at breakfast is up 5% versus last year. So that's also putting pressure on the home occasions. Lots more detail within the report to dig further into the whys behind those changes. I also wanted to just touch on snacking as well, because it is a robust behavior. And when we talk about snacking in 5, we have the ability to create multiple universes for examination. So for example, we can look at concise groups of foods or foods and beverages to define the snack food universe, or as we have in the context of the report, organically look at everything consumed outside meals as the true antithesis of snacking behavior. And with that in mind, we see a number of changes. Now, snacking flexibility throughout the day, and it's fit to multiple occasions and a broad cross-section of needs, keeps it robust. So the average Canadian consumes a snack 9 times a day. That's both foods and commercial beverages. Afternoon snack does remain the largest day part, but we have seen in general a rise in daytime snacking, while we see a decline in evening snacking. Now, the rise in daytime snacking has opened the door to non-traditional snack items. So the lines are blurring between what's a meal food and what's a snack food. We've seen growth in things like ready-to-eat cereal and sandwiches. And overall, versus 2020, non-traditional snack foods are up 9%. Now, more than 7 in 10 snacks continue to be consumed at home. But as I mentioned earlier, there is movement away from home, and that really opens the door to more portable and portioned solutions. Consumers are looking for that kind of fit, grab and go type convenience for their snacking behaviors. When we look at needs overall, we see that daytime is more health focused, while evening does remain predominantly about taste and treat and craving. But it should be noted, overall, the demand for healthy and nutritious snack options across all day parts is up 8% versus 2020, with the most notable growth in the afternoon. So really some considerable changes overall in snacking. So as we close out our time together and referencing the consumption culture compass, there's a few things I just want you to keep top of mind. Remember overall societal forces, the population change is good because it is expanding demand. Remember the balanced cuisine opportunities, the ESG levers, but how it's really important to create stories and communication that's much more personalized to connect with the consumer. Remember with consumer forces, the rising impact of the value trigger on both meals and snacks. Remember, health is getting even more personal. And when we look at nutrient priorities, remember the rising importance of protein, sugar, carbohydrates, and what's on the ingredient label. And then finally, the trend toward minimalism and how important that is overall to understand. Remember, if you don't consume more, you're not going to buy more. When we think about the technology force, remember multiple new touch points to connect with consumers to both shape and aid at those consumption moments. And finally, in the contextual cues, remember food service is on the rebound, but more consumption outside the home is not necessarily a bad thing, as it not only opens up the pathway to the lunchbox and the lunch bag, but also to more potlucking. And finally, in this chain to create a more succinct, change-ready culture, remember that trends and their impacts really, really do matter. Well, thanks for your time today. Over to you, Ellen.
Wow. That was a lot to digest, and that was a pun intended. So thank you so much, Kathy, for today's really in-depth presentation. And given that is just a highlights presentation, I know there's more at the ready. So thank you everyone for joining us. If we didn't get to your question, and I think there may be some questions popping in now, we will send an email with a direct link to today's recorded presentation and any answers to your specific questions, so be on the lookout for those. And in the meantime, please do feel free to reach out to us directly. There will be some contact information for you coming into your inbox directly. Oh, and here they are, actually, a whole team of experts. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a most wonderful day.
Thank you all.